I'm Stephanie Rule. What a week we have had. We are now 158 days away from the election. And Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, is now the first U.S. president to be convicted in a criminal trial. A jury in New York City found him guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying business records to hide hush money ahead of the 2016 election. It is an historic moment, and there is a lot to unpack. With that, let's bring in our nightcap, my dear friend, MSNBC host, NBC correspondent, and New York Times best-selling author. She wrote the book, Unbelievable, on the Trump campaign, my dear friend Katy Tur. She was there when the verdict was read. Tim O'Brien joins us, Bloomberg Opinion senior executive editor and, of course, Trump biographer. Danny Savalas joins us, criminal defense attorney and MSNBC legal analyst, and comedian John Fugelsang. He's the host of the Tell Me Everything podcast on Sirius XM. All right, we have the verdict. There is no more use of the word alleged. Donald Trump has been found guilty. What does this moment mean?
Could you say it again slower for me, please? It would be lovely.
Guilty.
Yeah.
All 34.
I mean, it is, I think we can say it is the most important, completely inconsequential event in political history. It's not going to change anybody's mind, but there's no way to overstate the historic impact that it actually happened. The trial no one took seriously. The case no one thought could yield a conviction. And yet the emotion in so many people of realizing after the Mueller report had 10 counts of obstruction and no one cared. After the 2 impeachments and he walked.
People care.
Stealing from veterans. Sure, but not enough in Congress cared. And the emotion I got on Sirius XM last night from callers, grown men crying because they couldn't believe there was finally a bit of accountability. And I went from being very cynical about the whole thing to just being so moved by how much people's faith has been restored by these 12 New York jurors.
You know, let me chime in because...
And remember, he lost the last presidential election on the people cared.
Oh, he lost the last 2, if you want to be technical about it.
Well, people cared.
He lost some midterm elections as well. The room inside, the overflow room inside the courthouse, I was right next door to the courtroom.
She's flexing. She was there the whole time.
Yeah.
She
I
gave
wanted
me her
to be
pass.
there. No, I wanted to be there because I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see how he'd react to potentially being found guilty. I wanted to know if he would raise his eyebrows, if he'd shrug his shoulders. What would his face look like?
You brought binoculars.
I did bring binoculars because the screen is very small and you have to zoom in. Anyway, it was such an overwhelming experience being in that room because when they started reading the counts, they went so fast. And there was anxiety, there was tension. The reporters, I mean, people were shaking because who knows what's going to happen next? Does it affect the outcome of the election? Is there political violence because of this? How must those jurors be feeling tonight, today, tomorrow, and the next day as they think about, oh God, what if my identity gets released? What if I'm doxxed? What if I'm come after? What is the judge thinking? It feels like we are standing on the edge of something. I just don't know what.
Woo, you heavy. What does this moment mean?
We're on the edge of something. It's 3 more cases. Whether or not they'll ever go to trial, it remains to be seen. What's amazing about this case is this is the one that was on nobody's radar until really only a couple months ago. People were saying, oh, well, that's scheduled, but it won't go forward because all these other trial dates keep getting pushed out. Nobody expected this case to be much. People put it as number 4 out of 4 of the criminal cases against Donald Trump, me included. I did not place it very highly. In my view, any federal criminal case is always going to have a better chance of conviction than any state criminal case. And I still think that's the case. But the practical reality is that if Donald Trump's elected and he's inaugurated and any of those federal cases are still pending, they will go bye-bye. They will go poof. There will be an attorney general appointed who will make them go away. So if they ever go to trial, high likelihood of conviction. I just have to say that the New York case, I didn't see it coming up this quickly. I fell asleep on it, and then all of a sudden it was upon us. Even to the last minute, I thought, well, that trial date, it's got to get pushed out. And then it didn't, and it went forward.
What do you think this moment means? Do you think it only confirms people's political views?
I sort of don't really care about the politics of it right now. I think the ramifications of this, there's a sentencing coming up, there's an election, there are debates, there's so many other moments between now and November. But, you know, something John said earlier about Mueller didn't go there, the impeachments didn't go there. I think that's a really important thing to land on because Bob Mueller assembled a devastating amount of information about Donald Trump, but he chose not to prosecute him in a courtroom. He left that up to the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York and the Congress to look at his evidence and do something with it. They chose not to do anything with it.
And almost no one read his multi-hundred-page report.
Correct.
Yes, we did. I remember talking to you about it. But and then the Congress impeached him twice. The House impeached him twice. The Senate chose not to take it to trial. Donald Trump is turning 78 years old this month. And for about, 5 of those decades, he has gotten away with lying, exaggerating, undermining the sort of roots of civic and civil society. And this is the first time that he has been brought into a courtroom and that act no longer works. And in all of these institutional movements that have occurred around him during his presidency and his post-presidency, this is the first one where he got put in a box and the facts got presented to a jury and all of the bloviating and the BSing and everything else lost their power. And he employed one of his 3 lawyers to essentially try to do that for him. Embarrass the witness, defend your client in a non-strategic way that appealed to his emotions but wasn't strategically wise. The jury saw through that. Justice Merchan saw through it. And they delivered a 34-count guilty verdict.
I want to stay on that point because you just said he instructed one of his lawyers. Katie, you have covered him for years. You know him so well. Was one of the biggest challenges for Trump's defense team Trump himself?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, why do you think that they denied he had sex with Stormy Daniels? They didn't need to do that. They opened themselves up to Stormy Daniels testifying about the details of the encounter. Why do you think that they made a point of repeating that David Pecker said that he sold the most magazines ever? Why did they keep saying the President of the United States? All of that was, at least in part, to assuage the ego of their defendant.
Correct.
I mean, we would not be here if it wasn't for the ego of this defendant. That's what gets him into all of this trouble. Having the affair, allegedly, with the adult film star while Melania has a baby upstairs. All of this stuff, all the ego surrounding it is what got him into this position. The fact that he ran for president, that he ran for president again, that he lied about all of these things.
And that he was
it's
never
all
held,
ego-driven.
And then he was never held accountable, as because of wealth when he was younger, celebrity when he was a little bit older.
He has a unique ability to have no shame. And that's what's got him.
It has been his superpower.
Yeah.
But think about all the people in the last 24 hours who were saying it was a kangaroo court, it was unfair, it was a sham. I've yet to find anyone saying he didn't do it.
I've yet to find any of them say which specific charge, and there are still 54 charges to go, but which specific charge he's innocent of. My favorite of the defense memes is, well, Jesus was convicted too. And I've seen this all day long, literally comparing this man to the Nazarene, because the images, the memes, the AI pictures.
It's not surprising. There's a whole religious movement around Donald Trump. He's part of a prophecy. They take his name, they say Trump, the trumpets.
That's
exactly.
all of it. And the reality is
religious movement
that,
seeing him as a savior.
Yeah, but for me, that's my pet issue, because the only way you can support Trump is if you throw out the Beatitudes, if you throw out Matthew 25. And the irony of this fixation of Trump as a Christ figure is it was mixing conservative religion and authoritarian politics that got Jesus killed in the first place. They don't know how to defend him. They're just attacking the system itself. And that's why it's so moving to me to see the Republican Party finally embracing criminal justice reform, because they're going to start fighting for a convicted felon to get daily briefings really soon.
Danny, let's talk about something that the jury did that countless lawmakers haven't. Any one member of this jury could have taken evidence, could have ignored all evidence and said, not guilty. And if they had, they could immediately have monetized it and become a right-wing media star. They would be on television. They would be doing speaking appearances. They would write. Maybe they could get a job in a next potential Trump administration. How extraordinary is it that these 12 ordinary New Yorkers, none of whom asked for this, right? When you get called to jury duty, it is like getting chain mail. That they showed up, they did their jobs, and they put public service above self.
Well, it's more impressive than that when you think of it, because we only see the end result, the 12 jurors. Remember, we had a voir dire process where you also had other New Yorkers who were willing to raise their hand and say, you know what? I'm too biased. I can't serve. I can't be impartial. And they stood up and they walked out. That's actually something that Trump and Todd Blanche were complaining about. I actually think it's an admirable thing about our jury system that people in New York County are going to have certain biases, just like people in Staten Island are going to have different biases based on polling, based on election results. And all of those people during voir dire were honest enough, at least at the beginning. Some of them self-selected, raised their hand and said, you know what? I'm out of here. I can't be fair and impartial. And the 12 that remained were not 12 random people. There were 12 people who had to look themselves in the mirror and say, I can do this. I have opinions. I may have voted a certain way. I may have thoughts about the president. Because, look, this is not a case where you're going to find someone who didn't know who Donald Trump was. This is not a case where you were going to find someone on the jury who had no opinions about Donald Trump. I think it's virtually impossible to have zero opinions about Donald Trump. Everybody in America has a thought about Donald Trump. And yet, those people, by the time you got to those 12, once they had withstood the crucible of examination during the voir dire process, those were people who I guess I'm not that surprised, who had self-selected, kept themselves on that jury. And you're right, there was always a chance of a stealth juror who would have said, I'm going to say all the right things and sneak on this jury. Yes, that was a possibility. Maybe we got lucky. Maybe we got historically lucky. Maybe American history got lucky because no stealth jurors apparently made it onto the jury. Although Republicans might say a stealth juror for the prosecution got on the jury.
I'm surprised you even say that. I'm surprised you even put the maybe on there. Like there might have been a possibility. I would have thought that you would have looked at that jury and said, of course, that they were impartial.
I do think they were impartial. I think this was an impartial jury. I think they self-selected that way.
Trump's
I think
lawyers thought so.
Right. I think the criticisms.
There's only one challenge.
The criticisms from the right will be that.
Yes.
Hey, somebody got on there who's a Manhattanite who really just wanted to convict Trump. That's the narrative you're going to hear from the right.
Today, Donald Trump railed against his conviction while President Biden called those comments irresponsible and said the verdict shows no one is above the law. I want to know, how do you think this verdict will impact the election? And the first thing I want you to do, Danny, because there's all these people out there who think he's a convicted felon, he must not be allowed to run anymore. That is not the case. Explain.
There are exactly 3 qualifications in the Constitution to be the president, and we cannot add to nor delete those qualifications. So none of those include or have anything to do with being a felon or even being charged with a crime. And there is precedent. We have had a candidate run for office really from a jail cell, not a candidate with any real chance of winning. Donald Trump is the first ever to be convicted and run. And what is still an open constitutional question is whether a president can be jailed and whether a president can run the country from a jail cell. We don't know the answer to that. We have tons of people like me with opinions about it, but we really don't know until it happens.
We're willing to find out. Willing to find out.
There is no felony disqualification for running for president. Of course, there is impeachment. You can impeach a president if you can connect that crime to something in the office. But no, a convicted felon can run.
You have to impeach and convict.
Correct.
Impeach and convict, and then the removal is automatic upon conviction.
John, how do you think the verdict will impact the election?
It's almost impossible to tell because I think this will be ancient history by November. I think America has the collective attention span of the guy from Memento, and something that happened way back in the end of May will be a distant memory by the time we're in the month of October. I think that there's a very good chance the first presidential debate in June will have more of an impact than this ruling. I just don't know of any citizens whose minds will be changed by this. After he stole from veterans with a fraud online university and mocked a disabled guy, I don't know who's going to, oh, well, now I really don't like him. After 6 Star Wars movies, I'm ready to say Darth Vader's the bad guy. I think people's minds are made up. There may be some Nikki Haley supporters who this will nudge them to vote. But at the end of the day, I think this election may wind up being not so much Biden-Trump. It may be Trumpism versus not Trumpism.
I think John's right about that. I don't think you can tell how this is going to affect the election. I also think we do have a very short collective attention span. I had Jen Palmieri on the air today, and she was arguing, I was surprised by this, she was arguing to take Donald Trump's comments live more. So let him talk on television more. The exact opposite argument that Democrats made in 2016 when they said you took Donald Trump too much, you gave him too much airtime and too much attention. Now they're saying no, have him out there reminding people what he sounds like, how he goes off on these tangents, how he makes no sense, how he's always railing against immigrants and sounding, in their words, bonkers. They'll use a different B word, but they'll say bonkers. I'll say bonkers. That will remind voters that Donald Trump is erratic and chaotic, and he was not a good president. And it was exhausting having him in the White House, waking up every day to a flood of tweets on your phone. What did he say last night? What war might he start? They think more of Donald Trump, not less, is better, and that will collectively change people's minds up until November.
This takes me exactly to my next question.
I'm great at transitions.
There is a group of people who do not want that to happen, and they're not Democrats. They are mega-rich GOP donors who have said, even in the last 2 weeks, yes, we're going to back you, Donald Trump. I want to talk to you about this, Tim, because a year and a half ago, lots of them, especially Wall Street ones, they were hot on DeSantis, they were hot on Nikki Haley, and they collectively said, we're upset about January 6th, we're done with Trump, all the baggage, and we have seen them in the last month, even in the last 48 hours, start to line back up next to him. After the verdict, I went through the phone, I was calling donor after donor, Wall Street guy after Wall Street guy. None of them are fazed. Is this because they are transactional and they know he is as well? And at this moment when he's down, he's keeping score. He's going to see exactly who was with him. And in 6 months, if he's the next president, all of these super powerful guys are going to have even more power, not just, oh, we're going to get the corporate tax cut extended or carried interest loophole is preserved. They are going to have a bat phone into the White House to get whatever the hell they want. And if you are Elon Musk, if you are Steve Schwarzman, if you are Nelson Peltz, that is worth gold.
Which he already, he's already promised that to oil lobbyists.
Just 2 weeks ago. Give me $1 billion and I'll give you what you want.
I'll get wherever you need me to go. I think there's only really two issues that the people funding Donald Trump from the financial community and from the business community care about, especially the ones who are leading the collection services. It's lower taxes and deregulation, and it ends there. And it's because those most directly affect the health of their businesses and their wallets, in the same way that flip-flopping Republicans who once said they'd have nothing to do with him are now lining up behind him because he has that kind of sway and gravity within the GOP. You're not going to be able to get through, in the current era, a primary without some nod from Donald Trump.
But, Tim, it's even more than that. You run a big business. At any point, you got the SEC, you got the FTC on your ass, and in the next term, you can call DJT and say, yo, I don't want to take this call, and he'll fix it for you.
And he'll try to fix it for you. It won't be that easy, but he'll try to do it.
Well, Joe Biden certainly won't do it for you.
The other thing that is worth focusing on here is that the business community should care about long-term economic growth and widespread prosperity. It helps them. It helps their children. It helps all of them in myriad ways.
Yeah, good luck. We live in a world of short-termism.
You mean what they've had for 27 months?
Everything that he's proposing undermines that. He's got inflationary policies. Yeah. Everything he wants to do will add to the deficit. It doesn't give us a more educated middle-class American population. Everything that he wants to do is ultimately, in the long term, against the interests of the business community. But in the short term, it pads their wallets.
But it goes to ultimate power, right? Elon Musk is the best example, right? Wall Street Journal was reporting it this week. He's potentially putting together, some sort of partnership, a coalition. He'll go out and raise money for Trump. Look at Joe Biden's policies. Pro-electric vehicles. That's great for Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, anti-electric vehicles. Donald Trump's #1 arch nemesis is China. That's Elon Musk's great next frontier. I'm not even talking about the extraordinary stock market, yet Elon Musk is now Donald Trump's homeboy. If that's not about ultimate power, I don't know what is.
Well, Elon Musk, let's be fair. I mean, the thing I like best about Joe Biden is how many evil billionaires despise him. That's been really encouraging to me. And oligarchs are going to oligarch and get behind a guy like Trump. I think Elon Musk is a bit of an outlier because he seems much more concerned with being the Joe Rogan of billionaires to dude bros than actually being a successful businessman at this point. He seems much more focused on his own popularity and being adored by people, sort of like a Republican presidential nominee, I could point out.
Should we be alarmed when things are so blatant? I'm certainly not saying the White House is for sale, but when you're seeing, whether it's the meeting with the oil execs, when you're suddenly seeing business people whose policies...
Stephanie, aren't you saying that? Aren't you saying the White House is for sale? That I will do what you want me to do.
He solicited a bribe.
Which it was during his first term. It was during his first term. There was a shingle on the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's true. That is a major concern, that the White House is for sale. And he signaled that during his first term. So I don't know why anyone would be that surprised. We were talking about this earlier, that there was this hope in 2016 that the White House would change him. And we already know what we got. We know what we got for 4 years, so there won't be any surprise this